The crystal began to whisper the next night. At first it was faint, a soft hum threaded beneath the crackle of torches, but soon it swelled into a chorus of voices that pressed against my skull. I tossed in the bed, the mark on my wrist glowing through the sheets, veins of gold crawling higher toward my shoulder. My breath came ragged, sweat slicking my skin as the whispers sharpened into words I could almost understand. Rise. Come. Yield. I stumbled from the bed, drawn through the dark corridors of the fortress, the sound like 1,000 claws scraping against my mind. The demons I passed dropped to their knees, heads bowed, murmuring prayers in their guttural tongue. They did not stop me, they knew where I was going. The stone doors of the cavern loomed ahead, already open, the air pulsing with heat. The crystal tower blazed brighter than I had ever seen, its chains writhing as though alive. I staggered forward, every step dragging me closer until my knees hit the ground. Light spilled across me, wrapping around my arms, my throat, my chest, searing me with a hunger not my own. And then I felt him. Kale's hand gripped my shoulder, anchoring me, his heat cutting through the crystal's pull. Fight it, he snarled, his voice like thunder. Do not let it take you. But the chains lashed out, striking him across the chest, tearing open his flesh and sending blood splattering across the stone. He didn't falter. His arms locked around me, his body shielding mine as the crystal's fury tore at us both. Pain screamed through me, but beneath it burned something intoxicating, a rush of power, a taste of infinity. I could feel the curse bending, eager to spill into me, to crown me as its vessel. My heart thundered with terror and longing all at once. Kale's breath seared against my ear, ragged and furious. Look at me, he commanded. My gaze snapped to his, molten gold locking me in place, his eyes a fire strong enough to rival the crystal. You are not its slave, he growled. You are mine. The words detonated in my chest, more binding than the chains, more consuming than the whispers. My pulse stuttered, my lips parted, and before I could think, before I could resist, I pressed against him, tasting blood and fire as our mouths collided. The crystal shrieked, its chains snapping tight, but in that moment, I wasn't afraid. Because for the first time, I realized the curse wanted me, but I wanted him. The crystal's summons dragged me into the depths long before sunrise. My legs moved as though strings pulled them, each step echoing in time with the burn in my veins. Kale walked beside me, silent, his jaw hard, the torchlight painting his features in sharp gold and shadow. The closer we drew, the heavier the air became, thick with the hum of runes alive beneath the stone. When the iron doors opened, the cavern flared with light, the cursed pillar throbbing like the heart of some ancient beast. Its glow flooded the chamber, chains writhing around it like serpents, and the mark on my wrist blazed in reply. I stumbled forward, pulled against my will, until Kale's hand closed around mine. His grip was iron, his heat biting, but it was the steadiness in his voice that anchored me. Breathe, he commanded, low and rough. If you let it take you all at once, it will rip through you. My chest heaved, the fire spreading from my wrist to my throat, my chest, my heart. The crystal sang, a chorus of voices older than my kingdom, each syllable vibrating in my bones. For a heartbeat I saw visions again, Kale's army bound in chains, dragged through centuries of slaughter, their screams swallowed by the runes carved into their flesh. Then the visions shifted, and I saw my own people, my king robed in white, priests chanting as they poured blood into the stone, forging the curse with hands that trembled not from mercy but from greed. My stomach twisted. My kingdom had not cursed the demons to protect us. They had cursed them to serve us, to be eternal weapons against our enemies. And when those weapons turned, they buried the truth beneath tales of monsters. The fire dimmed enough for me to fall to my knees, gasping, the mark still glowing but no longer consuming. Kale crouched beside me, one massive hand braced on the stone floor, the other hovering near my cheek but not daring to touch. His eyes burned with something I could not name, torn between triumph and dread. It has accepted you, he said, his voice hoarse. The crystal knows your soul now. It will not release you. I should have wept, should have screamed, but all I felt was a hollow ache where certainty used to live. My people had abandoned me. The curse had claimed me. And Kale, the man I was meant to kill, now looked at me as if I was the only thing keeping him alive. The cavern stayed with me long after Kale led me back to my chamber. Even in the dark, with no crystal in sight, I could still hear the whispers it had poured into my bones. They followed me into sleep, haunting me with visions of chains snapping, armies burning, a crown of ash pressed onto my head by hands I could not see. I woke gasping, clutching the mark on my wrist, and found Kale standing at the window, his sword sheathed but his stance tense, as though he had not left all night. His gaze flicked to me when I stirred, and for once, there was no fire in his eyes. Only exhaustion, and something dangerously close to softness. "It's feeding on you faster than I expected," he said quietly. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Then teach me how to stop it." He studied me, then shook his head. "You can't stop it. You can only learn to bend it before it bends you." His words crawled under my skin like the chains themselves. "And if I fail?" Kale's jaw tightened, his golden eyes hardening. "Then you'll become its vessel. A curse wearing human flesh. The army will follow you instead of me, and the world will drown in blood." The weight of it nearly crushed me, but anger surged to life beneath the fear. "So my people bound you, condemned your kind, and now I must suffer for their sins?" My voice shook, sharp as glass. "Why should I pay their price?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, looming over me until his shadow swallowed the bed. His heat pressed against me, suffocating, magnetic, and his voice dropped low, a growl edged with desperation. "Because you're the only one who can. Because whether I deserve freedom or not, whether your people deserve truth or ruin, the curse has chosen you. And if you refuse it, if you falter, everyone dies." His hand slammed into the wall beside my head, the stone cracking beneath his palm, but he did not touch me. His breath shuddered out, warm against my face, and for a heartbeat the fire in his eyes wasn't fury, it was need. I should have recoiled. I should have cursed him. Instead I sat frozen, pulse racing, caught between terror and something far more dangerous. Because for the first time I understood that his chains were no longer his alone. They were mine too. The fortress was never quiet anymore. The mark on my wrist had awakened something in the stone, and now the hall seemed to breathe with me, torches flaring when I passed, shadows twisting to follow my steps. The demons bowed lower, their whispers sharp and reverent, as if I had become more than Kale's bride, as if I were something sacred. I hated it. I hated the way their eyes lingered with awe, how my pulse quickened under Kale's gaze whenever he watched me from the far end of the hall. The vial of poison strapped to my thigh had become a cruel joke. I could still feel its weight, but I no longer believed I would use it. One evening he summoned me to the training yard. Rain lashed the black stones, and Kale stood bare-chested in the storm, runes carved into his flesh glowing like molten gold against the night. He tossed me a blade. I caught it clumsily, my arms trembling as the weight dragged me down. "What is this?" I snapped. He leveled his gaze, sharp and merciless. "If the curse claims you, you must learn to fight it. To fight me. I will not let you be taken without a chance." I wanted to hurl the blade at his feet, to scream that I was no warrior. But something in his eyes stopped me, something that dared me not to falter. I swung. He parried easily, the clash of steel ringing through the rain. Again. Again. Each strike he deflected, each stumble he corrected with a brutal shove, until my muscles screamed and my breath came ragged. Again, he thundered, catching my wrist and twisting until the blade flew from my hand. He pressed me against the wall, his body a cage of heat and fury, rain dripping down his horns. My chest heaved against his, every breath stolen from the space between us. "Do you understand now?" he growled, his voice low and raw. "Power answers to no one but strength. If you do not master it, it will master you." The mark on my wrist flared where his fingers pinned me, the fire shooting through my veins until I gasped. His eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to my eyes, and for one dangerous heartbeat I thought he would close the space between us. Instead, he released me so suddenly I nearly collapsed, the sword clattering at my feet. "Again," he said, stepping back, his voice hoarse. Until the curse bows to you, or kills you. And though my body trembled, though my heart screamed to run, I bent down, picked up the blade, and faced him once more. The training consumed me. Days bled into nights, the clang of steel echoing in my skull long after I collapsed into bed. Cale never spared me, never softened his blows, though sometimes I thought I saw the flicker of restraint in his eyes, a hesitation he smothered before it reached his hand. He drove me past exhaustion, past pain, until the sword no longer felt like iron in my grip but an extension of my own fury. Each time the mark flared, I felt the crystal's chains tug at me, whispering promises of power, of surrender. And each time, Cale's voice cut through the haze like a blade. Breathe. Control it. Do not let it command you. I hated him. I hated the way he barked orders, the way his presence swallowed the yard, the way his hand lingered just long enough to steady me when I faltered. I hated how my pulse betrayed me, racing not with fear but with something far more dangerous whenever he pressed close, his breath hot against my ear as he forced my stance straight. One night, after hours of drills beneath a sky split with lightning, my strength failed. My blade slipped from numb fingers, clattering to the stones. Cale seized my wrist, forcing my palm against his chest where the runes blazed, searing my skin. Fire roared through me, visions tearing open behind my eyes, battlefields, centuries of slaughter, chains dragging him upright each time he tried to fall. I saw his face, younger, unscarred, screaming in defiance as priests carved the runes into his flesh. His agony ripped through me, so raw I gasped, and when I tore free, I found him staring at me as though I had stripped him bare. You saw, he whispered, voice rough. I nodded, trembling, unable to speak. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Rain dripped from his hair, his horns gleaming like obsidian, his chest rising hard beneath the glow of cursed light. Then he stepped back, his face shuddered, his voice steady once more. Now you understand why this must end. But I did not move. I could not. Because the truth I had seen carved itself into me, more permanent than the mark on my wrist. Cale was no monster. He was a man broken into chains, carrying a war not of his making. And God's help me, that knowledge was far more dangerous than any curse. The fortress no longer felt like a prison. That was the most dangerous realization of all. The demons bowed when I passed, their reverence no longer sharp with suspicion but softened into something closer to loyalty. They whispered my name now, not as a bride, not as a sacrifice, but as if I were already bound to them. Cale kept his distance for days after the night of visions, his training commands clipped, his eyes averted when my wrist flared in response to his runes. Yet distance did not dull the tether between us. I felt him everywhere, his heartbeat pulsing in mine, his exhaustion dragging at my bones, his fury crackling in my chest whenever he stood before his soldiers. And at night, when sleep came, I dreamed his dreams. I saw him walking alone across battlefields littered with ash, his sword dragging behind him as though he carried not iron but centuries. I woke shivering, my body aching with the weight of wars I had never fought. On the third night, I found him on the balcony overlooking the black plains. Rain slicked his hair, his armor discarded, his bare skin glowing faintly where the runes clawed across his chest. He didn't look at me when I stepped into the storm. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice rough. The curse feeds more when we are near each other. I moved closer anyway, drawn as though the storm itself pushed me forward. Then why do you keep coming back? His head turned, golden eyes catching mine with a force that made my breath stutter. For a heartbeat the world shrank to nothing but the space between us, the fire in his gaze, the heat rolling off him in waves. Because I cannot stay away, he said, voice raw, torn from somewhere deep. His hand lifted, hovering near my face, trembling with restraint. I should have stepped back. I should have reminded myself of the poison hidden in my chamber, of the oath I had sworn to kill him. Instead I stood frozen, the rain dripping down my cheeks, my pulse hammering with something I could no longer name as hatred. His hand brushed my skin at last, calloused fingers searing against my jaw, and the mark on my wrist flared so bright it cast shadows across the balcony. The curse hummed, alive, demanding, but for that one breathless moment it was not chains that bound us. It was choice. And I was terrified of the choice I was about to make. I did not sleep after that night. The echo of his touch lingered like fire beneath my skin, a warmth that no rain could wash away. Every time I closed my eyes I felt his hand at my jaw, his breath mingling with mine, the mark on my wrist burning brighter with memory alone. I tried to convince myself it was only the curse binding us closer, weaving its chains through my veins to tether me tighter to him. But the lie frayed each time I caught Cale's gaze across the hall, each time his golden eyes softened for the briefest instant before he looked away. The demons noticed. Their whispers grew louder, reverent, dangerous. They spoke of balance, of prophecy, of a bride not meant for sacrifice but for salvation. I told myself I hated it, but a small, traitorous part of me thrilled at the way their gazes shifted, as though I carried power greater than Cale himself. One evening, as the sky bled crimson, Cale summoned me to the cavern once more. The crystal pulsed louder than ever, its chains thrashing, its runes shrieking in a language I almost understood. The mark on my wrist seared, dragging me forward until I stood before it, my knees trembling. Cale's voice carried behind me, steady but grim. "It is testing you. It will not be long before it demands your soul in full." My throat tightened. "And if I give it?" His footsteps echoed closer, the heat of him pressing against my back. "Then you will shatter it. The curse will break. My army will fall to dust, and I will finally die." His breath ghosted my ear, low and rough. "But if it consumes you before that, the world will bleed until nothing remains." My pulse hammered. The choice carved itself into me, sharp as any blade. Freedom for him, ruin for me. Or survival for me, damnation for all. I should have recoiled from the weight of it. Instead, when Cale's hand brushed my shoulder, steadying me as the crystal roared louder, I leaned into his touch. Just for a heartbeat. Just long enough to feel the truth that terrified me more than the curse ever could. That I no longer wanted to free the world from him. I only wanted to free him. The crystal's call grew unbearable. By day its hum haunted the walls, rattling chains that no one else seemed to hear. By night it invaded my dreams, dragging me into visions where I stood crowned in fire, Cale kneeling at my feet as the world crumbled into ash. I woke screaming more than once, my wrist blazing gold-hot, only to find Cale already at my side, his hand steadying me though his eyes burned with something torn between fury and longing. He never spoke of those nights, never admitted he stayed, but the scent of smoke and steel clung to him when dawn broke, proof he had not left my chamber. The demons grew restless. Whispers reached me of unrest among the ranks, of soldiers who believed I was their salvation and others who saw me as a threat to their chains. Twice I caught them watching me with daggers in their eyes, and twice Cale's presence alone sent them scattering. But the unease grew, swelling like a storm. One evening, he led me into the war room where maps littered the table, marked with human banners pressing closer to the fortress. My people had not abandoned their war, they had only paused to sharpen their blades. "They will come again," Cale said, his jaw set, his hand braced on the map. "But now they no longer seek my death. They seek yours." The truth sank cold into my bones. My kingdom had declared me traitor, heretic, demon's bride. There would be no homecoming, no welcome, only execution. My pulse thundered as I stared at the man I was meant to kill, the man who had become my only shield. "Then what am I now?" I whispered. His gaze lifted, locking with mine. The fire in his eyes was not cruel, not triumphant, but searing all the same. "Mine," he said, low and certain. The words stole the air from my lungs. I should have spit in his face, I should have reached for the poison I still kept hidden, but instead my body betrayed me. My heart stuttered, my breath trembled, and when he stepped closer, the heat of him drowning me in the scent of storm and steel, I did not move away. The mark on my wrist blazed like a brand, binding me tighter than chains ever could, and I knew with sickening clarity that the line between enemy and savior, between curse and desire, had already shattered. The crystal's roar followed me into every corner of the fortress, a ceaseless hum that grew sharper each day, until it was no longer just a sound but a hunger threading through my veins. I felt it in the way my hands trembled when I touched the hilt of a sword, in the way my chest tightened when Cale stood too close, the mark on my wrist answering to his runes like a lover to its call. I feared it, yet part of me craved it, the way one craves fire despite knowing it burns. Cale noticed. He always noticed. His gaze lingered too long, heavy with warning, but his words carried a desperation he could not hide. If you surrender to it, you will not be yourself. You will be the curse-given flesh. His voice was rough, almost breaking. And I will have to end you. He meant it, but God's help me, I saw the war in his eyes. I doubted he could follow through. That night, when sleep eluded me, I wandered the silent halls until I found myself in the war room. Maps sprawled across the black table, marked with battles stretching back centuries. Cale stood over them, his hair loose, shadows hollowing his face. For a long moment I only watched him, the weight of his presence pressing against me. He looked less like a monster and more like a man fraying at the edges, worn thin by chains that refused to let him break. How many battles? I asked, my voice soft but cutting through the silence. He did not look up. Too many to count. Too many to remember. His hand clenched around the edge of the table. When one ends, another begins. There is no peace. There is no victory. Only slaughter. My chest tightened, the mark on my wrist burning in sympathy. I stepped closer before I could stop myself, drawn to the rawness in his voice. And if it ends? What then? His gaze lifted at last, golden eyes blazing with something fierce, something that carved through my ribs and left me hollow. Then I finally rest. The way he said it left me trembling, not with fear but with something far more dangerous. Because I realized then that I did not want him to rest. I wanted him to live. And that desire was the most treacherous curse of all. The next morning the fortress stirred with unease. I felt it in the way the demons paced the halls, in the tension crackling like a storm before lightning. Whispers reached me even before Cale summoned me, human banners had been spotted on the horizon. My kingdom had returned, not with priests or emissaries this time, but with an army vast enough to darken the plains. They had not come to rescue me. They had come to bury us both. Cale met me in the courtyard, his armor gleaming black and gold, the runes across his chest burning so brightly they cast shadows in the dawn. His soldiers assembled in perfect ranks behind him, chains glowing faintly, their faces grim, resigned. When his gaze met mine, I saw no fury there, only inevitability. They will force your hand, he said, voice steady despite the tension that gripped the air. The curse wants blood. If you step into the battlefield, it will answer to you, whether you intend it or not. My stomach twisted, the mark on my wrist already burning, hungry for the clash of steel. And if I refuse? His jaw tightened. Then it will drag you anyway. He took a step closer, his hand brushing my arm, rough and heated. For the first time there was no restraint in his touch, only a raw urgency that left me trembling. If you fall, if it consumes you, look at me. His golden eyes seared into mine, desperate, unyielding. I swear on the chains carved into my flesh, I will not let you suffer. I will end it before it devours you. The words should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself clinging to them like a promise, even as my pulse raced with something that felt far too much like desire. The horns blared from the ramparts, signaling the advance of my people. The ground trembled with the march of their soldiers. And as Cale turned to lead his cursed army into yet another slaughter, the mark on my wrist flared so hot I cried out, flames curling along my skin. I staggered forward, pulled by the bond, and Cale's hand caught mine without hesitation, his grip scorching. Our eyes locked, and for a single heartbeat, the battlefield vanished, the world narrowing to only this, two souls chained together, forced into a war neither of us chose, bound by a curse older than kingdoms. And God's help me, I no longer knew whether I wanted to break it, or surrender to it. The plains became a furnace. The armies clashed in waves of steel and fire, my kingdom's banner snapping in the wind, their chants of holy vengeance swallowed by the guttural roars of demons dragged forward by chains they could not resist. I should have screamed for my people, should have wept at the slaughter, but the curse had no room for tears. It seized me, yanking me into the heart of battle, Kale's grip the only thing tethering me to myself. Each swing of his sword sent fire through my veins, every strike mirrored in the mark on my wrist until I felt as though I too wielded his blade. The crystal's voice rang louder than the clash of steel, 1,000 whispers commanding me to unleash it fully, to surrender and drown the world in its power. And God's help me, it felt good. Heat swelled in my chest, spilling into my hands, flames dancing across my skin like I had been born to wield them. Soldiers faltered before me, not knowing whether to strike or kneel. My people's eyes widened with terror as I raised my hand and the ground itself split, fire surging to consume the front lines. Screams tore through the air, human and demon alike, but I no longer knew which belonged to whom. Only Kale's voice cut through the madness, a raw growl at my ear. Control it. Do not let it own you. His hand clamped over mine, forcing the fire back, his body pressed to mine as if his strength alone could hold me together. I gasped, the power searing, begging to be released, but Kale's presence anchored me, golden eyes fierce, his grip trembling yet unrelenting. For a heartbeat the curse obeyed, the fire dimming, the chains slackening. My soldiers recoiled, their chants breaking into cries of fear. Witch, they screamed. Abomination. They looked at me not as their offering, not as their princess, but as something worse than the demon they feared. My heart cracked, but the fire inside me blazed brighter, feeding on the betrayal. Kale's arm tightened around me, his voice low, fierce, a promise and a warning all at once. They will never take you back. You are mine now. Ours. And though every part of me wanted to deny it, the mark on my wrist pulsed an answer, the fire humming in my blood, and I realized with a shuddering breath that he was right. I no longer belonged to them. I no longer belonged to myself. I belonged to the curse, and to him.